Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we got a bit of a show and tell episode, I think. Um, I like probably many of you like to print out my creations or my models on a 3D printer so I can paint them. I'm big into miniatures and statues and things like that. But there are times when I'm not quite sure how to approach a project, and I'm talking specifically about like painting a project, how the shadows are going to fall, how the light's going to fall on the model. Some of them are a little bit more complex than others. And I thought it might be cool to show you guys how you can use Nomad to kind of prototype how you're going to paint a model in terms of the lighting. It's super easy to do and it's super, super helpful to show, not only how the lighting is going to work, but how also the paint selection, the color selection is going to work for your model. And it's very, very easy to do. So it's just a simple matter of either creating your own 3D model in Nomad or importing an existing 3D printed file, an STL file. And the way that you do that is you can just import any, let's see here, any standard STL file into Nomad. And I have a pretty complex model that somebody else did that I wanted to approach it from a painting perspective. It was going to be pretty difficult. And I used Nomad to kind of prototype how that's going to look. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal these different STL files that I brought in already, and you're going to see how complex this is. Okay, it's a character from the Batman universe, but a lot going on in terms of lighting. I wanted to do something that shows like the spotlit effect, almost like a car headlight is shining up on the character. So that's going to involve very motivated shadows in terms of direction and things like that. And you can see here how that works. So I just brought in that STL file. Let's turn off some of these lights. And in terms of lighting, it was just, I started with just an environmental light. Here, we'll turn them all off so you get the silhouette. So let's turn on that environmental light. And it's just a very minimal exposure for that. Okay. And then it's a matter of just adding in some of these other lights. And it really is, in terms of positioning, to taste. Whoop. Let's select that light. And you can see here how that works, okay? And it shows you real time how those shadows fall then, which is super, super helpful when you go to paint a model. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Let's turn that one off. This is just more of a moonlit effect just for this area on the gravestone. And this is just, I think, an overall more moonlit. I don't quite remember. Yeah, for that background. So let's turn all those lights on. And I like to keep it initially when I'm figuring out what I'm doing in for a painting scheme. I like to keep it as a black and white because then it's easier to determine, okay, well, this is going to fall into shadow, this is going to fall into highlight. And then I transfer that over into the 3D model. It's called zenithal highlighting, I think, where you paint the entire model black and then you follow up with a white paint to simulate the way that the lighting is going to fall. And then that kind of gives you like a roadmap in terms of how you're going to approach your painting. So I went ahead and started painting just in Nomad to kind of get a feel for how this is going to look, or the look that I wanted to try at least. Whoop. Let's turn those lights back on. There we go. So let's start with just the very basic. And I start with my shadow layer, the underlying layer. Let's turn that on. I wanted to mute that a little bit. So this is where the very basic of it begins. Just that shadowy layer, the underlying layer of the skin. And then I add another layer that is just my basic skin tone, the mid-tone of my skin. And you can see already how that is being affected by the light. And that gives you, you know, a roadmap in a sense for, you know, color selection. You can pick out the colors here and how that's all going to work. Let's keep going. I added like a blue veining, which is very, very subtle. You can see that in here. I don't know if that's showing up. Yeah, okay. Hair highlights, or hair highlights. This is very basic. And I just did that for each piece of the model, okay? Let's turn that off. Shadow multiply, skin tone. Same here. Shadow, skin tone. We'll do the legs. Shadow, skin tone. Shadow, skin tone. And you can see it starting to come together. Now, I didn't do this whole model yet. This is just to kind of show you guys. We have the midtones for the pants. And I went through this a bunch of different iterations to finally come up with, you know, the correct color. And also you can use Nomad's new features to kind of mess with the hues if you need to. So like if I want to change, if I want to change the hue of that color, you got to select the layer it's on and go in there. You can change it via that way, which is super helpful. And this is also the other reason why I like to work in layers, as you can see here, because you can control the opacity. So like this obviously is way too high, but if I set it at 15, that's pretty much where I want it to be. Okay, let's continue. We'll add the highlights, and you can start to get a feel for how this is coming together. Now the face is going to have more layers than most, just because of the detail that's involved with it. We'll start with the shadow layer, just going along with what we already had. Skin tone, basic skin tone layer, okay. The eye color, which is just like a cloudy eye. Let's zoom in that. And that's all it is. It's just like a white set to a lower opacity. Let's see, 8.3, so barely anything in there at all. If I were to bump that way up, it's just white, you know. Let's go back, 8.3. But that shows some of that underlying shadow tone. It brings it back. Mouth highlights, which I need to work on. The tone of the teeth, the lips, bring those down. That's what we have. Okay. And you can see as an overall figure, it works pretty well. Some of this is still pretty rough, but you get the idea. So let's do one just to show you guys. Let's say I want to add a cooler tone to that. So I'm going to go to add layer. I'm going to select a color. And I'm just going to, I could paint all, but I think I'm just going to, so you guys can see how this works, just kind of paint. And it's super easy. Super, super simple. And it's only going to affect the individual, you know, STL. I'm going to make this a lower opacity there. And you can see how that works. I'm going to go ahead and do the same for here. I'm going to keep the color the same, I think. Okay. You know, a little bit there in that shadow line. I'm going to erase some of that, where that light is kind of coming through. We'll do the same for the bottom. Whoop, got to erase one. And you want to watch, because see here's the delineation of the shadow and the highlight, or the shadow and the light rather. You don't want to cross over there. So you follow your roadmap, you know, so to speak. There we go. Of where that light is hitting. Okay, I got to get rid of some of this. See where it crosses over? Like here, you wouldn't necessarily see it. Maybe a tiny bit. But like here, here, here. Okay? That would be a different color because of the light. So we'll call that shadow tone because it's in shadow. Whoop, whatever. Shadow tone. Okay. Let's add another layer and let's figure out a color that is going to be appropriate for this. If that makes sense. And here's, you know, where you can really try and figure out color-wise what's going to make sense with what you already have. So I have it on a separate layer. Paint that just to see how this looks. And this is the beauty of doing it this way, is it's not permanent. Nothing is set in stone, so to speak. You know, you can do this to your heart's content and make changes on the fly and see from different angles because the light is going to affect the paint differently when you go to paint it. Let's get it down here. Through here. Mess with that in a minute. Get that painted here. Add another layer because it's a different piece of geometry. Okay. Anywhere that light is falling, that highlight. I'm being super not picky with it. Let's see. Now I'm going to go ahead and change the feel of this. I don't care for how I feel like it needs to be a little bit more yellowish. So this is what I need to figure out. You know, that raw color. Maybe it's just more gray. Maybe it's in here. Or do I go colder? Maybe that's it. Like a colder light. Take that tone down, the saturation. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm going to go back to... So this is the thing I'm going to need to really try and figure out. I like this look. I need some more painting in here. That should be like that. But that's the whole point, is you can experiment with all of this to get it, to fine tune it before your paint ever touches your model, okay? Which is the most amazing thing about it. So something like that, to that extent, you kind of get the idea. But yeah, you could see like all of this in here, this is all going to fall into shadow. So it's going to be a darker paint selection than my basic skin tone. This is just pretty basic right now. I have a lot to do yet on that. But yeah, so this is the model. This is the roadmap, so to speak, what we're doing. What I'm going to show you next now is the actual model. I have it somewhat worked up. It's still a work in progress, but you'll get the idea of how this process works. So let's head over to the work table now, and I'll give you guys a look. Okay, so here you can see, excuse the mess, where the model stands right now. And you can see how, you know, via the roadmap of the Nomad painting and lighting setup that I have, how that follows. Now I still have a long way to go. So you can see I have some things masked off because I'm painting it. But you can see, you know, the shadows, how the shadows are falling, how that whole look is working. Here is the kind of the moonlit area of the model, how that falls. Let's see if we can maybe get a little better lighting here for that. Like this area in particular, all that gorgeous detail, and that's all worked out beforehand. I have my roadmap of my highlighting and my shadowing, where all that is falling on the model, and I just kind of follow along with that. And it just makes life a lot easier in terms of how I'm painting it. You can see here some of the face detail. I'm working on the pants right now, which is why all this is masked off. And then the shadow side of the model, how that's all kind of coming together. And it saves me time, it saves me paint, because I'm not necessarily like in an exploratory mode for how all this kind of comes together. I already know ahead of time how I'm kind of laying everything out. Let's see if we can get a better shot here. There we go. But it's just another tool that you can use, especially if you're into miniature painting. This actually is pretty big. For how you can light and paint complex models like this one. Okay, so I hope you guys found that informative. As always, I appreciate you watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see everybody next week. Take care.